Hello and happy Tuesday, which is, of course, my book reviews day. And today we're going to talk about the original classic. Yes, my friends, this is The Godfather by Mario Puzo. This particular edition is just some old paperback edition from like 2002, early 2000s, nothing too fancy. The novel itself did celebrate its 50th anniversary back in 2019. The film, which is almost even more popular than the novel itself these days. We'll get into that in a second. Just celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. And later this month, February of 2023, Suntup Editions is doing their own version of The Godfather. It is going, I don't know anything about the details behind it, other than what Suntup did in their quarterly newsletter. Presumably it'll be 6x9 as far as the trim size goes, because that's pretty standard for Suntup editions. I know it will feature presumably it'll be the same introduction that Francis Ford Coppola did for the 50th anniversary edition. It also features a note from, is it Anthony Puzo? Mario Puzo's son? Which is also a note from the 50th anniversary edition. So presumably it's not going to be a new introduction or new note. It's going to be those reprinted 50th anniversary editions, which I read. This isn't the 50th anniversary edition. This edition here has an introduction by Robert J. Thompson, who is, he was the chair of the founding director of the Center for Study of Popular Television at Syracuse University, and an afterward by Peter Bart, who is an editor-in-chief at Variety, but also previously worked at Paramount Pictures, who, wouldn't you know, made the film version of the film adaptation for The Godfather. So I've actually I had never read The Godfather before. I've seen the films, primarily parts 1 and 2, plenty of times. Love the films. Well, ignore part 3. I'm not a huge fan of that one, but a lot of people aren't a huge fan of that one. But I had never read the novel. I've had this paperback for a while and figured I would dive in, especially with the upcoming Suntup edition. And let me tell you, I have never been more thrilled reading a novel, having the mental image of having seen the film, and saying, holy crap, that adaptation is probably one of the best film adaptations I've ever seen. Like, this novel reads just like how the film plays out. There are some additional pieces within the novel that didn't make it over to the film translation, but if you've seen the film and you love the film, go read the book. You're going to love the book. There's additional stuff in the book that's not in the film, but the bare bones of it is exactly the same. There are scenes and dialogue that is, I haven't watched the film in a couple months, but that is pretty much verbatim from the novel. So if for some reason you were unfamiliar with The Godfather, it is the story of the Corleone family in New York and Long Island, a little mobster family. The novel starts off with a couple different characters, such as Johnny Fontaine and their problems, and they all decide they're going to all go see The Godfather, Don Vito Corleone, because it is his daughter's wedding day, and they're going to go ask him for some help. So Johnny Fontaine is a struggling actor. Well, he's not really struggling. He was a singer. His voice is kind of gone. Now he wants a movie part, but the producer will simply not give it to him. So that leads to him going to ask for help from his godfather, consigliere, or attorney. Tom Hagen goes to Hollywood, tries to talk some sense into the producer. The producer's not having it, and the producer is awoken to find his prize horse's head in his bed. Very famous scene from the film. And then, well, they are approached by Salazzo, who is the Sicilian who's trying to get the family, this mafia family, into the drug trade. Don Vito Corleone isn't having it, and thus starts some actions and a little bit of a gang war that involves the youngest son, Michael, having to flee to Sicily, go and hiding in Sicily. And, well, I don't want to go into too many details because that would just be a spoiler. If you've seen the film, you know what happens. If you haven't seen the film, go watch the film. If you haven't read the book, read the book. Like I said, everything that happens in the film almost happens exactly as it occurs in the book. There are a couple slight differences. Fredo, who's from the film, the middle brother, is referred to as Freddy throughout most of this. He is referred to as Fredo on a couple occasions. His characterization felt a little different than how he was portrayed in the film, but maybe that's just because I have the mental image of John Cazale from the film. One of the big differences between the novel and the film are its stories with Johnny Fontane. The Johnny Fontane being, like I said, that singer who can't sing anymore, goes into acting. There's an entire book talking about his time in Hollywood. Whereas in the film, he's a very minor character. He's there in the beginning, he wants his film role, and then he kind of vanishes for the rest of it. Doesn't really add anything else to the story other than having that iconic horse head in the bed scene. Whereas here you have an entire book, like it's broken up into parts. Book 1, Book 2, and so on. There's an entire book dedicated to Johnny. There's an entire book dedicated to Lisa, the bridesmaid that Sonny, the eldest son, has sex with on the wedding during the wedding of chapter 1. And there's her struggles over in the West Coast, over in Nevada, and the doctor she meets and begins a relationship with, which I personally didn't feel like added anything. And in some regards, I know with the whole zeitgeist of the film itself really taking over the identity of the Godfather, and maybe I am Lucy, not Lisa. Lucy watched people around the pool, and Dr. Jules Siegel is the doctor that she has relations with. Anyways, the zeitgeist of the film, maybe that is influencing my opinion here, but I almost feel like those other side stories don't really add anything to it. There's a little bit more detail of Michael and Cicely, which was phenomenal, added more to what you have in the film. The one member of the family who joins very late in the game, dresses up as a policeman, Neary, former Officer Neary. He dresses up as a cop in the film itself to shoot Barzini down on the steps of the courthouse. There's a good chapter about Neary's past, which is phenomenal. The characters are more fleshed out. Luca Brasi, who's the character who, he's kind of the attack dog, if you will, for the family. He's there in the film wishing for your first child to be a masculine child in the film, and then he has his own little storyline. You get more into his backstory in the novel here. He is a very despicable character, by the way. Holy crap. But the actual other side plots, such as Lucy, such as Johnny Fontane, it didn't really add to the novel itself. They were very strong. They were very smart decisions to cut those characters out or reduce their roles within the film. Like I said, both characters are still in the film. Sonny Corleone still has sex with Lucy at the wedding. Johnny Fontane still shows up, sings a song, starts his own little storyline, but then they kind of vanish from the film. And it's a very smart choice. One thing that can be said about The Godfather is that I think Mario Puzo was very horny when he wrote it. It's a very horny novel. Lucy, her big problem is that, she's got a lot of room down there. The only man that can satisfy her is Sonny, and there are paragraphs describing how well endowed Sonny is, and how he's the only one that can please Lucy. And so part of the storyline with Lucy in Vegas with Dr. Jules Siegel is that he wants to give her cosmetic surgery to tighten her up. And there's a lot of horniness, a lot of, you can have your sex scenes, but they kind of bounce around the sex scenes a little bit. Little chapters here and there talking about their sexual organs and their sexual exploits. But one thing that as I said, this edition is not the 50th anniversary edition, but the 50th anniversary edition is the text. I mean, the text is the same, but it is the introduction. It is the note being used in the Suntup edition. One thing that his son does say in his note for the 50th anniversary edition is that Mario Puzo was, and this is the quote, the son, ready to grow up and sell out. His first few novels had been well received critically, but not big bestsellers commercially. Mario Puzo was doubling down and ready to write a bestseller. he was selling out in a way, just because he needed the success from The Godfather. One thing that's very interesting, and this is from both Francis Ford Coppola's introduction and the note from Puzo's son, is that both of them talk about Don Corleone, the titular Godfather, being inspired by Puzo's mother. So the "make him an offer he can't refuse" is a quote from his mother. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. I mean, well, that's a Sun Tzu, idiom anyways, but it's something that Puzo had heard through his mother. So now I have the image of Marlon Brando dressed up as Don Corleone in drag, and that's now how I'm picturing Mario Puzo's mother, but that's how it is. I will say that both introduction and note that accompany the 50th anniversary edition are kind of bare. Francis Ford Coppola talks about the process of writing the screenplays with Mario Puzo. They co-wrote the screenplays for all three films together. And they would write notes. Mario Puzo would write notes in the margins of the draft that Coppola would turn over. One of the notes, and it's a note that is reflected in both Coppola's introduction and Puzo's note, Puzo's son's note, Anthony Puzo, is that the one scene, Clemenza is teaching a recipe to Michael Corleone, Al Pacino, and he says, "Oh, you gotta let the garlic brown." And the note written in the margin was, "Gangsters don't brown, gangsters fry." And it's little fun stories like that in the introduction that you're getting from Francis Ford Coppola, talking about how Mario Puzo was a big gambler, and they would, for all three films, they would go to a casino, and he would take breaks from writing to go down and try the roulette table. And once he lost enough money there and got aggravated with that, he would go back up and work on the screenplay some more. And it's fun little stories like that. However, it's a very short introduction. The same thing can be said about the note from Anthony Puzo. It's a very short note. That more so details his father basically hunkering down in his study, telling the kids to shut up, say, "I'm working on a bestseller here." And it's a very good introduction, a very good note. However, I will say that my paperback version here has introduction by Robert J. Thompson, which I personally think was a much better introduction. Unfortunately, Thompson's not as famous as Coppola, or doesn't have the name rights as Anthony Puzo, so this introduction kind of falls by the wayside. But it's like pages upon pages talking about the film atmosphere, the year in which it was published, 1968, what the heroes of the time looked like. Not 68, 69. 69, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and how the actual publication of the Godfather, and then the subsequent film for The Godfather, really changed cinema at that time. It changed people's view of the mafia, as well as the view of what a hero or anti-hero is. The afterword here is a really solid afterword as well. This being from the gentleman Peter Bart, talking about the financial struggles of Puzo wanting to write this, and then how things went a little more successful after there, especially when Coppola enters the picture and giving more insight on the production itself. It's very interesting. One other thing that is very interesting about the introduction from Francis Ford Coppola and the, I can't remember if it was the introduction or if it was the note. I feel like it was the introduction by Coppola. Yes, it was the introduction by Coppola, because it would have been Coppola's point of view, and how even though Mario Puzo was not related to the mafia in any way, he really hit hard on this. He talks about how the mafia is like vampires. They won't come into your life unless you let them in, and that there was an experience when making The Godfather Part 2, when Gotti, a representative from Gotti, the mobster, showed up at Coppola's trailer and wanted to introduce himself to Coppola, and Coppola's like, nope, I'm not available. And it sure enough, it sounds like a vampire. You gotta let him in. Very interesting indeed. And I believe it was in the afterword here of this version. There's also another fun anecdote, fun story about how Frank Sinatra, who is the inspiration for Johnny Fontaine in the novel and the film, was screaming at Puzo in a restaurant once because he felt that his portrayal in the form of Johnny Fontaine was poorly done. Anyways, if you love the movie, read the book. If you for some reason haven't seen the movie, check out the movie. It is a masterpiece. I'm very interested to see what Suntup is doing with their edition, because I have no knowledge about the specs of the novel. I just go off previous knowledge of previous Suntup titles. It's probably going to measure 6x9. We know it's going to have an introduction by Francis Ford Coppola and Anthony Puzo, Mario Puzo's son. Presumably those are the same introduction and note from the 50th anniversary edition. So if you wanted to check that out, you can buy the 50th anniversary edition online. The cover is not going to look like this because this is an early 2000s edition, but go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, you can find it. Like I said, the text of the novel is still the same, and it's a hell of a read. Just be aware that some of the characters are going to be a little misogynistic, but it takes place in the 40s, where I suppose that is kind of with the times. But man, what a great novel. What a great read. Go check out suntup.press when the announcement comes out later this month. You can pick up a copy. If you're on the numbered train, you can pick up a numbered edition copy. But you had to have previously purchased. The last title was The Magus by John Fowles. If you purchase The Magus, or if you have number 251 through 350 from Hannibal Rising, you have first dibs at The Godfather by Mario Puzo, the Suntup edition, or you can just buy the artist edition, which is stunning right away. No idea what the price point is going to be. Artist editions have been running from about $140 up to $200 for some of the higher end ones based on the size and publication quality. So it is going to be a little pricier. It'll only be signed by the artist. Number edition will be signed by the artist, Anthony Puzo, Francis Ford Coppola, and I can't wait to see what Suntup does with them. Anyways, I'm just geeking out about Suntup now. Thank you very much for watching. Seriously, check out The Godfather by Mario Puzo. Both the novel and the first two films, absolutely fantastic. Absolute masterpieces. Check out suntup.press, and we'll see you around next time.